Last night, I got on the T just to go down memory lane. We passed Kenmore Square.
This is David Zaslav, the CEO of Warner Bros. Discovery, one of the biggest media companies in the world. He's trying to give a commencement speech at Boston University in 2023, but is having a hard time because the graduates keep booing him.
I had to find something that really interested me, something that I really loved. But that was really scary.
The most immediate reason why everyone hates him here is because, at the time, Hollywood writers were on strike, and the crowd is trying to shame Zaslav into giving the writers what they want, namely higher residual payments and guarantees they won't be replaced by AI. But there were a lot of Hollywood executives who were holding out back then. The hate for Zaslav seems particularly pointed. That's probably because, at this point, Zaslav was already known as the most hated man in Hollywood. Why? So many reasons. Zaslav laid off thousands of employees. He decided not to release already completed movies like Batgirl and Coyote vs. Acme, taking tax write-downs instead. He removed dozens of shows and movies from HBO Max, including big hits like Westworld and lots of popular cartoons. He was cutting Turner Classic Movies to the bone before directors like Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg convinced him to stop. He changed the name of HBO Max to Max and then changed it back again. He regularly gets yearly pay packages worth tens of millions of dollars while doing all of this. So Zaslav obviously wasn't the only person responsible for all of these decisions, but they all happened under his watch. So you can understand why people would think that he is a heartless jackass, a terrible CEO, and an all-around knob. Warner Bros. Had been around as a movie studio for almost 100 years when Zaslav took over. But with him in charge, people honestly wondered if it would last the week. But a funny thing happened this year. Warner Bros. Has thrived. The studio released 7 movies in a row that each made over $40 million on their opening weekends at the domestic box office, a feat that has never been accomplished before. And the movies themselves have, on the whole, been very diverse, very well-rounded, and very good. We had new entries in the Final Destination and Conjuring franchises. We had family-friendly fare like a Minecraft movie. We had original films like Sinners and Weapons, a big splashy sports drama in F1, the most exciting superhero film in years with Superman, and finally One Battle After Another, an accessible art house epic from legendary director Paul Thomas Anderson. Not every movie the studio made this year will appeal to everyone, and not all of them made money. Justice for Mickey 17, it was great, you should watch it. But this is a very solid lineup, and Warner Bros. Was smart about it. They could rest easy knowing that they'd make enough money from big movies like Superman and Minecraft that they could take risks on stuff like Sinners and Weapons. And both of those were big hits, which proves that there is still a market for reasonably budgeted original movies, whatever the spend-happy remake jockeys at Disney will tell you. By September, Warner Bros. Had become the first studio in 2025 to make over $4 billion at the box office, something it hadn't done since before the pandemic. This is hugely impressive, since theater attendance dropped when the pandemic hit, and it still hasn't recovered. Unless you're Warner Bros. As someone who loves going to the theater and doesn't want to see him die off, this matters to me. The question is, has all this happened despite David Zaslav's horrible leadership? Or has he actually known what he's doing the entire time? That's what we're going to discuss today on... Alright, some quick backstory. David Zaslav graduated from Boston University. Yes, he was booed at his alma mater in 1985 with a law degree. He practiced at a big firm for a few years, but found himself attracted to the glitzy world of television, as so many of us do. He worked as an executive at NBC for a long time before becoming president of Discovery Communications in 2006, where he helped launch popular shows like Naked and Afraid and Dr. Pimple Popper. Zaslav built Discovery into a reality TV powerhouse. And I don't want to get too down on reality TV here. Lord knows I've watched too many episodes of House Hunters to claim the moral high ground. There's nothing wrong with reality TV, but you wouldn't think that making a ton of it would prepare Zaslav to take over a movie studio like Warner Bros., which had a reputation for prestige, classiness, and artistry. But that is what happened. In 2022, Warner Bros. Merged with Discovery, and Zaslav became the CEO of the newly formed mega company, creatively called Warner Bros. Discovery. Right at its birth, the company was saddled with some $50 billion in debt. much of which it inherited from Warner Bros.' previous owner AT&T, which had done a god-awful job of managing the studio. So Zaslav's first big task was to get this debt under control, which he has kind of sorta a bit. As of this past summer, the company had only $37 billion in debt. That's still a lot, but you know what? You try getting rid of $13 billion in debt in 3 years. I'll wait. It's hard, right? But I don't think this will win Zaslav many points, since he cut down that debt by slashing jobs and removing content, all while getting paid obscenely well. In 2023 alone, the man received a pay package worth nearly $50 million. To put that in perspective, he was paid, or promised to be paid, more in 1 year than it cost to make Weapons, which is one of his studio's biggest hits in 2025. He could have made another Weapons and still have millions left over. Or maybe he could have cut back on his salary and used some of that excess money to avoid layoffs. But honestly, the problem of excessive executive pay goes so far beyond David Zaslav. $1 trillion, Elon. Really? $1 trillion? That it feels kind of fruitless to lay it all at his feet. I'm more interested in how a guy whose critics say he hates artists and hates movies was able to run a studio that made so many good ones. The simple answer is that he didn't. Warner Bros. Discovery is a huge company, and David Zaslav has to mind all of it. Movies, TV, games, publishing, the money pool, etc. He's not actually making the day-to-day decisions about movies. That task he entrusted to Pamela Abdy and Michael DeLuca, who head up Warner Bros. Pictures together. They deserve a lot of thanks for this year's fantastic run of movies. If Sinners or One Battle After Another wins Best Picture, and it definitely feels like a possibility, Abdy and DeLuca will be up there with the cast and crew accepting awards, and they will have earned it. But I think Zaslav deserves some credit too, because he did two very smart things. First, he hired Abdy and DeLuca in the first place, and second, he had the good sense to step back and let them do their thing. A couple of years ago, The Hollywood Reporter interviewed a bunch of employees about Zaslav's management style, and the consensus was that if you're doing a bad job, Zaslav will be all over you. That's what happened to Chris Licht, the former CEO of CNN. You know, Licht was reportedly not interacting with his staff, and he left important time slots open for way too long, and just generally kind of sucked at his job until Zaslav got fed up and replaced him. But if you're doing great work, like Abdy and DeLuca, then Zaslav lets you be and helps when asked. There are other examples of this. Casey Bloys had been an executive at HBO for years when Zaslav promoted him to CEO of HBO and Max Content in 2022, and he's been doing a fantastic job ever since. HBO has made waves in recent years with shows like The Penguin, The White Lotus, The Gilded Age, Hacks, and The Last of Us. And let's not forget that brand new show The Pitt won Best Drama at the Emmys this year. I am absolutely looking forward to shows like The Chair Company and It, Welcome to Derry, and really enjoy the new season of Peacemaker. So kudos to Mr. Bloys, another guy Zaslav leaves alone because what's there to correct? And speaking of Peacemaker, creator James Gunn was another great hire. Gunn had already worked with Warner Bros. Before Zaslav came along, but Zaslav made Gunn and Peter Safran the trustees of the new DC Cinematic Universe, which is off to a great start with Superman. As a CEO, I think David Zaslav's best asset is that he's good at finding quality people, putting them in the right roles, and then stepping back to let them do their best work. And it might sound like a cop-out to say he's good at doing nothing, but if you have ever had an overbearing boss who micromanages you to the point where you can't get anything done, you know that not every boss has the wisdom to do nothing. Also, it goes too far to say that Zaslav does nothing. In that Hollywood Reporter article, Michael DeLuca praises him for helping seal deals with major talent and for wooing theater owners, which brings me to the other thing I like about Zaslav. He is a big fan of seeing movies in the movie theater.
We come to this place for magic.
So when Warner Bros. Was owned by AT&T, the studio released the whole of its 2021 slate simultaneously in theaters and on HBO Max. The pandemic was raging at the time and no one was going to theaters, so I kind of understand where they came from, but it ticked off a lot of big-name creators. Christopher Nolan, probably the most prestigious director working today, was so outraged over Warner Bros. Releasing his movie Tenet like this that he left the studio entirely, and he'd been working with them since before Batman Begins. As Nolan said at the time, some of our industry's biggest filmmakers and most important movie stars went to bed the night before thinking they were working for the greatest movie studio and woke up to find out they were working for the worst streaming service. Now, I don't think HBO Max has ever been the worst streaming service. I think that was the anger talking, but, ouch. This never would have happened if David Zaslav had been in charge at the time, because for all his faults, Zaslav understands that releasing movies in theaters is not just a good way to keep talent happy, it's also a great business move. As he said at CinemaCon in 2023, we do not believe in streaming movies. Movies in theaters perform substantially better when we bring them to HBO Max than any of the direct-to-streaming movies. And he's right. People have studied this stuff, and the fact is that movies released in theaters first are watched more on streaming than movies that are released straight to streaming. Plus, movies that come out in theaters can earn a lot of money from the box office, whereas straight-to-streaming movies don't have that opportunity. For studio heads, the choice seems really easy. Release movies in theaters, then release them on streaming, and everybody wins. And doesn't it make kind of inherent sense that movies released in theaters would be more popular? Theatrical releases get talked about in public and on the internet, whereas a lot of streaming-only movies kind of get put onto the background and then forgotten. And that may be by design. It's been reported that filmmakers working for Netflix are encouraged to make their stuff as easy to follow as possible, so people can still enjoy it while scrolling on their phones. How can a movie designed to be bland go on to become a classic? How can a movie that is milquetoast on purpose hope to have any impact on the wider culture? And then think about streaming-only movies in contrast to stuff like Barbie or Oppenheimer from a few years ago. Going to the theater to see those became an event. Think about fans riding homemade sandworms to the premiere of Dune Part 2. Even this year, movies like Sinners and Weapons created buzz in the real world. They got people excited, and I think that would have been much harder to do if they were released straight to Netflix or HBO Max or whatever. There's something about the ritual of seeing a movie in a theater that helps embed it in your brain. You have to leave the house, sit in the dark with a bunch of strangers, and watch the movie on a 30-foot screen while munching popcorn. Even though everyone's supposed to be quiet, it is a communal activity, which makes it feel special in a way that turning on a movie in your living room just doesn't, even if the movie is good. And there have been a lot of good films that go straight to streaming, but they have a tougher time sticking around. I think their chances would be better if they came out in a theater first, because releasing a movie in a movie theater makes it feel important. It makes it feel more like art and less like content. Despite all of this, streaming services like Netflix would prefer that you never go to a movie theater again. Netflix does release some movies in theaters, but usually it's for a very brief period of time in a limited number of venues, just so the movies can qualify for awards. They yank it as soon as they check those boxes. Netflix wants an all-streaming future. That sounds horrible to me. So I am glad that there is someone like David Zaslav out here keeping the theatrical experience alive, even if he's only doing it for the sake of his bottom line. So that is my defense of David Zaslav. Warner Bros. Studios is on the upswing, and I think he is at least partially responsible for that. But there are still lots of ways he could mess it up.
But before the sun went down, I think that was the best day of my life.
At that CinemaCon, David Zaslav gave a speech about how he fell in love with the movies while growing up in Brooklyn. He said that there's nothing like the experience of sharing a movie with an audience, which is the kind of thing you would say if you want cinephiles on your side. And he does have some, old school Hollywood mogul tendencies I find kind of charming. He works from the desk of original Warner Bros. Founder Jack Warner, which he had dug out of storage for the occasion. And he moved into a house previously owned by Robert Evans, who produced classic movies like The Godfather. So I can believe that David Zaslav, maybe has some genuine love for film somewhere in him. But we shouldn't forget that his first allegiance is not to movies, but to money. He came up as a businessman during the heyday of Ronald Reagan, when regulations were being relaxed and everyone thought that money would, just trickle down to the masses if only we let the rich have enough of it. And he's thriving in today's age of massive conglomerates and mega mergers. And that is where Warner Bros. May be headed. Recently, it was announced that Warner Bros. Discovery would be splitting into two companies. David Zaslav will control Warner Bros. Streaming and Studios, which will consist of HBO, HBO Max, Warner Bros. Studios, and Warner Bros. Games. So basically, all the parts of the company that are actually fun and profitable. Meanwhile, current CFO Gunnar Wiedenfels will control global networks, which will include cable networks like CNN, Discovery, and TNT, as well as Discovery Plus and Bleacher Report. Global networks will get saddled with most of the company's remaining debt, which I remind you currently stands at around $37 billion. So Wiedenfels definitely has the harder job. According to sources at the New York Post, Zaslav's ultimate goal is to make these companies small enough so that some huge tech firm will buy them. Because today, it's never enough to run a thriving business. You have to set yourself up to be bought by someone bigger and richer and then make off with a huge payment. You know, to people like Zaslav, businesses aren't about making good products or pleasing customers or even about profits. They're speculative assets. They're pieces in the chess game that is high finance. Zaslav may like movies. He may even be good at running a movie studio. But at the end of the day, he mainly wants the line to go up like pretty much everyone else at his level. And the line has gone up, that is, Warner Bros. Stock has gone up, since this news broke. Potential buyers for Warner Bros. Include Netflix, Amazon, and Paramount Skydance. Of those options, Paramount is the only good one since it's actually a movie studio and might want to continue Warner Bros. Historic hot streak in theaters. If Netflix buys the studio, sooner or later, everything will be shuffled onto streaming, and I will be sad. Whatever new form Warner Bros. Takes, I hope it stays independent, which is a possibility if Zaslav doesn't get the bidding war he wants. In the end, I can see him fulfilling his destiny and becoming a corporate raider. But I'm also thankful for him for keeping movie theaters filled with good movies. And the studio's success may have even had positive effects on the likes of Netflix, which has shown signs lately of relaxing its rigid restrictions about theatrical releases. So to sum up, I think David Zaslav is more or less worth tolerating, at least until corporate culture changes and we get executives who care about something other than line go up. That's hardly a ringing endorsement, but I don't think I would join that chorus of boos either.